3 weeks earlier, I had left the country for an important business trip. My mansion sat empty and fully secured while I was away. At least, that's what I believed. I couldn't have been more wrong. My trip ended much earlier than expected, so I booked the first flight home. I was looking forward to relaxing in my own house. I had no idea someone else was already living there. The moment I pulled into my driveway, something felt wrong. There were unfamiliar cars parked outside my mansion. The front porch lights were on. Someone was definitely inside. I reached for my keys and tried to unlock the front door. The lock had been changed. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had taken over my home. A woman I'd never met opened my front door. She immediately told me I was trespassing on her property. Then she demanded that I leave before she called the police. I honestly thought she was joking. I calmly explained that I owned the mansion. I even showed her my driver's license and property records. She refused to look at any of it. Instead, she laughed and slammed the door in my face. Moments later, she called the police. I overheard her telling dispatch that an armed trespasser was attempting to enter her home. That statement couldn't have been further from the truth. Things were escalating quickly. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived at the scene. They approached both of us professionally and began asking questions. I handed them my identification immediately. The woman insisted I should be arrested. The officers contacted county dispatch to verify ownership records. The information came back almost instantly. The mansion was legally registered in my name, and it had been for years. The officers politely asked the woman how long she had been living there. Her answer shocked everyone present. She proudly announced that she'd been living in my mansion for nearly 3 weeks. She believed the HOA had legally given her permission to move in. The officers asked her a simple question. Do you have any legal documents proving ownership or a lease agreement? She confidently handed them an HOA welcome packet. That wasn't the answer anyone expected. The paperwork she provided wasn't a property deed. It wasn't a rental agreement. It wasn't even signed by the legal property owner. It was simply an HOA document claiming she could move in. A few minutes later, the HOA president arrived at my mansion. She immediately claimed the HOA had authority over vacant homes in the neighborhood. The police officers asked her to explain exactly what legal authority she was referring to. She didn't have a clear answer. County property records confirmed my ownership once again. The mansion had never been transferred or sold. There were no liens or legal disputes. Everything belonged to me. Neighbors slowly gathered outside to see what was happening. Several residents admitted they had been told the HOA had permission to reassign vacant properties. That claim immediately raised even more questions. The entire neighborhood was shocked. I provided every document requested by the officers: property deeds, tax records, insurance papers. There was never any doubt about who owned the mansion. The officers asked whether the HOA had obtained written permission from me before allowing anyone to occupy my home. The HOA president remained silent for several seconds. Her answer was simple: no. Once Karen understood the situation, she appeared genuinely surprised. She claimed she believed everything the HOA told her. She thought she had legally moved into an abandoned property. The officers explained that property ownership doesn't simply disappear because someone goes on vacation. County officials began reviewing the HOA's governing documents. Nowhere did they find any provision granting authority over privately owned homes. The HOA had clearly exceeded its responsibilities. The investigation officially expanded. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that evening. Some members claimed they were unaware of the decision. Others admitted they assumed the property had been abandoned. Unfortunately, assumptions aren't legal ownership documents. My attorney reviewed every HOA document involved in the case. His conclusion was straightforward. The HOA never possessed the authority to grant occupancy rights to my mansion. The law was entirely on my side. Residents began demanding answers from HOA leadership. Many questioned how such an extraordinary mistake could happen. Trust in the HOA board was quickly disappearing. The community wanted accountability. Karen cooperated fully once she learned the truth. She gathered her belongings peacefully and thanked the officers for explaining the situation. It became clear that she had relied on incorrect information provided to her. The real questions now focus on the HOA leadership. County investigators continued gathering records related to the HOA's actions. Emails, meeting minutes, and official notices were carefully reviewed. Every new document provided additional clarity. The facts were becoming impossible to dispute. After 3 weeks of living in my mansion, Karen finally learned who actually owned the property. The HOA's unbelievable mistake had been exposed. My home was finally back where it belonged. And the biggest consequences for the HOA were still to come. The county commissioners requested a complete legal review of the HOA's authority. They wanted to understand how private property rights had been ignored. Every governing document was carefully examined. The HOA leadership was finally being held accountable. During the public hearing, several board members admitted they never verified ownership records. They simply relied on information provided by HOA leadership. The commissioners were stunned by the lack of due diligence. The entire situation could have been avoided with a simple title search. My attorney explained that private property rights are among the most protected rights in American law. No HOA can simply assign ownership or occupancy of someone's home. Legal ownership is determined by county records, not neighborhood opinions. That principle had never changed. Residents demanded greater transparency from their HOA board. Many felt embarrassed by what had happened. Others worried that similar mistakes could affect them in the future. The community wanted meaningful reform. Several HOA leaders chose to step down from their positions. They acknowledged that serious mistakes had been made. The neighborhood deserved responsible leadership moving forward.